So we had a whole day of teaching yesterday, and you all did 3 ATMs, which is getting back to the sort of number of ATMs that you were doing in the early part of this training. So in the early parts of the training, we often do 3-4 ATMs a day. And when we all reflect on our own trainings and past experiences, that immersive aspect of the training is so important, where you're just relentlessly working with yourself, looking inward. And I'm always curious about, with these internal processes, and we've been talking a lot about this sort of, maybe not a lot, maybe I've been talking a lot about it to individuals, this sort of internal authority versus the external authority. And some of you are experiencing that yesterday, this sort of shift from looking inwards and making decisions for yourself and then having to extrovert, as it were, and look outward and look at other people's processes and actually be part of their process as an external voice. So this idea of going internal and external, this idea of looking inwards and then looking outwards. And you could imagine that's a little bit, it's a little bit like flexion and extension, right? It's sort of closing off inwards, opening up outwards, that kind of physical metaphor. And how you find a balance for that ability to go inwards and outwards with as much ease as you do the bell hand movement. So people can wax very lyrical about the bell hand series and the importance of that in all sorts of ways. And we'll keep talking about it in various, either metaphorically, like that sort of introspective versus extrospective, the opposite. As the week unfolds. Anyway, so it's Thursday, day 5. So some of you who are on a 5-day-a-week work clock will be thinking today's Friday. The good news is tomorrow is Friday. Which leads me to ask then, how are you on day 5 of, so much ATM yesterday that was pulling you inwards and pulling you outwards? Because then, of course, even if you were an audience member, you had to reflect back, feedback on that person's teachings. You couldn't just stay in your own process. You had to enter somebody else's process, even as a participant. And how do you navigate that change of orientation? I think in the past, Feldenkrais has been interpreted as being very introspective all the time and about that internal discipline and knowing yourself. And we have, in the more recent years, really been very intrigued to find all these clues in Feldenkrais's teachings, particularly in Amherst and in his books, where he wants, his vision for humans is to be able to manifest this more refined, more efficient self-image in order to participate more effectively and efficiently in a social community sort of situation. So, there's a reason why, for example, you've probably done it a few times here. I know in our training, I didn't like it. When you do like a rolling lesson and you are asked to start doing it in unison, or sometimes the unison all happens spontaneously. And I, to my discredit, always thought it was just the conceit of the teacher wanting to orchestrate the whole room. But then I think through a series of discussions with my beautiful colleagues, realised that this is his socialisation. This is him tapping into a very innate kind of socialization, which is another reason why we do training programs in groups. I think I'm in a rambly mood today. Could be Little Miss Tangent today. Anyway, cutting back to you. You're lying on the floor. How are you? And today's Thursday. So Thursday's the day we're going to be working with the ATM that Feldenkrais describes in the chapter Awareness Through Movement in the Elusive Obvious. Did you remember that? Very good. No response. Complete inability to extrovert. Okay, so let's start exploring the ATM. So I'll remind you from an experiential point of view what he's on about. And start to become aware of the length of your legs, the left leg and the right leg. The length of the arms, the left arm and the right arm. And the length of the trunk. From the coccyx to the top of the spine, where it meets the head. And these are kind of snapshot looks, right? They're not in-depth exploration of each detail, but this kind of flash, if you like, on the legness of each leg, armness, trunkness. Being aware that around the base of the spine, below, related to the base of the spine, is the round ring or the bowl or some kind of image like that of the pelvis. Intimately associated with the thoracic spine is this rib basket or rib cage. The ribs arcing forward with the sternum. And sitting on top of the spine, the roundness at the ball of the head. And can you get a sense of all the dimensions of these three kind of relatively rounded objects? The pelvis, so its dimensions not only front to back, but top to bottom and side to side. So this kind of fullness. And the same thing with the rib basket. Do you have a sense of the front to backness? So that this basket has sides. The top to bottom, so the length of the rib basket. And the width. And the same with the head. That your head has depth, front to back. It has length. Top of the head to the base of the skull at the back and the chin at the front. And the space between your ears, so the side to side dimensions. And slowly come up to sitting. And have your hands behind you. You find a way to lean on your hands gently. So your elbows are more or less straight. And your feet are standing. I can see who's got the lesson in mind because you're your feet standing. All right, just do it. No, don't. Don't just do it.
You had your coffee today, dear?
No, it's here. Nearly down. Nearly down, Mum. 4 more swallows and I'm done. Okay, and now very gently, slowly. Now, a little tip for you as ATM teachers, when people are sitting, they get a little bit more social and they usually open their eyes and you're all looking at me. So you might need to remind people that you can still close your eyes in sitting. However, some people find that that's quite confronting because they don't have the full contact with the floor to know where they are. So you have to adjust your teaching so that you don't allow yourself, your physical might as a teacher be demanding of attention, right? So I might get up and walk around or I might not, but that can also be a bit distracting. So just be aware that sitting lessons evoke a slightly different feel in the room. It's a little bit more lively and it's harder to, it can be harder for people to really drop into themselves, okay? So slowly, slowly, start to lower both knees a little bit to the right and back to the middle and a little bit to the left. Slowly, slowly. And notice where the movement initiates. You might need to go right back, reduce, 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 so that for you, it becomes clearer where the idea of this movement first lands in you. And it might not be the same for the left and the right. So could you catch that degree of differentiation? And if you can't, it's perfectly fine, right? It's not an issue. And when you're satisfied with that, you start to grow the movement. And growing the movement only as fast as your attention can track the pieces that start getting pulled into the movement. Maybe for some people you feel like all of you starts moving right at the beginning. Probe that a little bit. Or some of you might get the feeling that it's a bit like picking up the first link of a chain, and as you lift that link higher, the next link gets picked up, the next link gets picked up, the next link gets picked up. How is it for you? Or maybe, 3 links all move together or whatever it might be. Just whatever image helps you to track the detail as well as the whole picture. So this is such a skill, isn't it? To be able to pay attention to detail and the whole picture, to be able to switch seamlessly between those two things. I think I'm going to spend this lifetime being able to look at the detail comfortably. Not my forte. And what bits of you have you forgotten when you have the whole of you in mind? Is it the whole of you? So if at any point do you know where your eyes are? At any point do you know where your ears are, both ears? Any point do you know what your baby toe's doing? At any point do you know where your belly button's pointing? Or how it's moving through space? At any point do you know what your coccyx up to? They're naughty little things, coccyx. They can just get up to all sorts of, if you don't, they're hidden away down there. They've got a mind of their own. So it's one of these funny things in Fun Cross. We get so interested in what we don't know. And it's such a marvellous thing because often when someone finds out that we don't know something, we try and hide it. We can get defensive or we argue or we do this, or we don't like it when we find out that we don't know something or that other people might find out that we don't know something. And Feldenkrais, it's this great twist. We kind of celebrate it. We go, fabulous. I'm really unclear about this. It's such a mature thing. I think that's what was really nice yesterday, watching you all receiving feedback with this kind of maturity. Like, I didn't know, because what you're basically receiving is maybe things you didn't know, maybe you did know, but can you hear that and go, that's really interesting, as opposed to, oh God, someone sussed out that I'm a failure, or I'm a mistake or something, or I'm actually really a dud. You know, that whole imposter syndrome thing that people will find out. Okay, lie on your back and rest. That's such a thing now in academia, this imposter syndrome. They actually run workshops for our early career researchers and new academics just to help them deal with all that ego shit. It's my technical term for it. I don't think HR call it ego shit, but that's what I call it. Yeah. It's useful though, you know, you can think, you know, as a teacher, people will challenge you and you'll be tempted to either cave, want to go into a corner and cry, or you might want to fudge it, you know, and pretend that you know, or you excite this curiosity about, oh, well, I'm not sure about that. You know, I thought this and now you've said that. This is interesting. So it's just as well we practice this process on the floor with just yourself and your own multiple personalities arguing with each other. And have these little simple symmetrical rotations left and right had an influence on your status as you're lying on the floor? Are you able to suspend your prior knowledge of this lesson so that you can really stay in the moment? So for some people, staying in the moment is quite easy. Some people will be already in the future and, you know, your body's kind of already going through the motor program for the, what you know, the sort of, not the finale of the lesson is, but you know that there is a bigger movement that you know. Are you already there? Or you're in denial because you don't like it? Or what? You know, where are you in the lesson? And how do you bring yourself back to the present moment? Where we're getting you to reflect on the history, so the influence of what you just did, and you know a little bit about the future, somehow you can still situate yourself in the present. So for some people that's not a problem at all. Where do you live? Slowly come back up to sitting. Have your hands comfortably behind you and your feet standing in front of you. And this time make sure that your feet and your knees are wide enough apart. This, you can keep adjusting this so that as you tilt your knees to the right and to the left, that there's room for the inside of the knee that you're tilting. That's sort of, if you're tilting to the right, it would be your left leg. The inside of the left leg could actually lie fully on the floor. So the knee could come to the floor. If you go into the right, it would be the left knee lying in the direction of the floor near the right foot. When you tilt your knees to the left, it'll be the inside of the right knee coming to the floor near the left foot. Now that's a lot of verbiage. Just quietly tilt your knees and you'll feel what I'm talking about. You'll feel whether there is enough room or not, because when your knee comes to the floor, it will either hit on the inside of your foot or not. And notice that to do that, there's something different about where your shoulders end up pointing and your head, and there's a little demand on the opposite arm. So if your knees are going to the right, what does your left arm want to do to support this intention of bringing both knees to the floor? So for some people it doesn't have to. It depends on, you know, the length of your levers and your idea of the movement. And again, bring your attention to this idea that I can pay attention to details, and I can also keep in mind the whole of me. So the whole of me is my nose and my eyes, my belly button and my coccyx, the top of my pelvis, so that, you know, those wings, the bit where we put our hands. What happens to your sternum? Could you track it? Could you track your sternum through the whole movement?
Susan?
Yes.
Do we have a constraint with the hand staying in front of
The hand that you're moving away from might like to lift up. Yeah. So, you know, you don't have to keep that as a constraint. Well, but, I shouldn't say but, Jenny will butt me. You butt me, Jenny? No. Oh, I forgot what my thing was. The hand that lifts. Yes, so go so slowly that you can feel when it would make sense for it to lift. So that it's not, that you're not allowing it to come off the floor simply because Susan told you to. So it's not, you're not picking it up off the floor, it's being lifted. So you really feel that moment. So just in this initial one, that it's kind of like just a passenger. It's not driving anything. And then we'll play around with a different intention in your arm in the next sequence. Also pay attention to what's happening in your feet and the way that your ankles are contributing and conforming. So there's a great term in biomechanics around the foot. It's a mobile adjuster. I really like that. These feet are so, well, they're actually a bit bi, right? That they can really be useful in pushing off, so they can become quite a rigid lever to help you push off, and you can feel that a little bit. They really can take weight and they can progress you forward, and you'll feel this in this ATM. However, they can also be incredibly dynamic and conforming to different surfaces. They're a really adaptable, beautiful piece of gear. Beautiful piece of kit, my boss would say. Leave it, rest for a minute if you need to rest in sitting or lying. It's equal. And if your leaning hand was getting tired or feeling a bit tweaky in the wrist, that will be an interesting thing for you to contemplate, is how can you arrange yourself when you're sitting up so that you don't commit so much weight to that hand or those hands. How can you distribute your weight so that your pelvis and your feet or foot or whatever is still doing their fair share of weight bearing? So this idea of shifting weight, one could say, is quite key in this ATM. I should stop. I'm giving you all the discussion points. Slowly come up to sitting. Volume up a little bit. It's probably because I've got the thing on my scarf and my scarf's moving. I'll take my scarf off. Is that better? Yes? Thank you. See how important feedback is? Okay, begin again that movement of bringing one knee towards the opposite foot. So both knees are coming towards the floor. And there might be a moment when the arm that you're moving away from is lifted up off the floor. And now this time, could there be an intention that that arm is not just being passively lifted up off the floor, but that it could come around with you with a bit of will in it, you know, a little bit of it has a bit of an intention of coming around with the whole of you, as if the hand wants to swing around with the pelvis. So there's a relationship between the pelvis. So hopefully you've all become aware that your pelvis is really rolling from one side to the other. You're really shifting your weight across that bowl of the pelvis, right? Remember, I was so keen for you to get a sense of its dimensions. So you're using its dimensions. And there's this connection, this dynamic. And then it would only require a little kind of tweak of your attention and a little bit of a less of a commitment to your leaning hand, that as you swing around, that you could actually put more weight on your knees and that your pelvis could become lighter. Something about your hand swinging around that lightens your pelvis. Well, actually, the commitment to your standing hand is actually a little bit increased. That was my failure. I always thought when Feldenkrais was talking about failure, he wouldn't say your failure, he'd say failure. But that's just the German, isn't it? Failure. Isn't that failure for in German? F-E-H-L-E-R? No, is that another language? I'm getting confused. What's the mistake in... I'm talking Czech. Aha. No? Yes.
Germans
Failure.
don't fail.
Yeah.
Germans don't fail.
Ah! There's no such word as failure in German. Right. I think we should... Yes. No. I think that's not true. Well, that's what the word I remember, because when I was studying German, I made a lot of failures. But maybe I'm not saying it right. Maybe I'm failing at that. Sorry? Oh, how do you say it? Fehler. Fehler. How does the Österreich say it? Fehler. Fehler. You can make a few. I've just made one. Okay. How's that going? Just let me see where everybody's at. Can you play this game that your pelvis is light and that the weight can go up onto your knees? And then, so this was my failure, that I talked too quickly about the commitment to your hand. Could you actually then let both hands be released off the floor and you just come up to standing on your knees only? Just Anastasia, she's future pacing. Just on your knees. Well, I'm just restricting you. I'm teasing you, frustrating you. So, you're all going into the next bit, which is fine. That means you're not listening. Okay, and feel the timing. Feel how the timing had to change to allow your pelvis to become light. And then challenge that view. So this is one of the magic things that, again, I'm telling you what we're going to discuss, but how we can use momentum first to get the feel of the movement and now try and slow it down so you don't need that ballistic action. What do you think? You could actually just use your organisation. Which means then the movement becomes reversible.
And it's like going in slow motion. It's very nice.
Does that help with the reversibility to slow down? Not. So now that lowering to the floor, just reminding you, that's eccentric. That's that. The muscles working eccentrically to slowly lower you. You could just cut out the contraction like no muscle tone and just fall to the floor, or the slow lowering is eccentric. You can feel it. It's quite hard work. It's neurologically hard work, which is why, again, why Feldenkrais is so insistent that we can do things reversibly. One of the many reasons. Where does your head go? And just take one more opportunity to track your pelvis through a cycle, through the cycle. So do you lose your pelvis at any point? Good, rest. Good. Have a well-deserved rest. And this rest time is a little opportunity for you to do a bit of an inventory around your system, just to check that you weren't overusing certain parts of you. If there's any bits of you that are a bit tweaky or a bit tired from that, then this is your internal feedback system that says, can you perhaps not put so much pressure on me? Which doesn't mean that part is wrong. It means that you've been concentrating the effort too much on one part. So can you take that feedback without fear, going, oh God, I'm hurting myself, and just saying, oh, that's really useful feedback. Really useful feedback. What else in me can move or contribute so that that bit isn't being taxed? Can you reframe discomfort and fatigue as really useful feedback? Just like yesterday when someone said, at times, when you were talking, your voice would trail off. It's really useful feedback. Slowly and gently roll over and come up to sitting. Leaning on your hands gently with your feet standing. Just again, warm up, so to speak, with your legs tilting. Just check that the initiation is still there and that you can still track the whole of you. So without this intention of a bigger movement first. And that somehow in this beginning movement, you can get a sense of the journey. And you can go slowly. And that you can track your pelvis, you can track the sort of basket of your ribs or the ball of your head, length of your arms and the legs. And then continue to allow the movement to grow, and then so that you can come up onto your knees, and then find a point where maybe the weight on the back leg can diminish and it can swing forward a little bit, just like you gave a little intention to that swinging arm. Maybe the leg on that side can get a little bit of a sense of swing around, and you pivot around yourself and find that that trailing leg swings forward and maybe gets a bit lighter on the floor. And maybe the sole of that foot could get a bit interested in coming to the floor. And you're using the timing of the movement and the movement of the pelvis. And the orientation is constantly changing. And at some point you'll feel lost in space, which is, again, it could be fearful, right? I'm lost, I don't know where I am. Or it could be, that's really interesting. I lose my sense of where I am at that point. And when you're satisfied with that, with the right foot or the left foot, whichever, that sort of the trailing leg that swings forward, is there a point when that foot comes to the floor and the opposite knee gets a bit lighter and both legs can straighten? Kind of sequentially. This is such a complicated movement. In the book, it just happens, right? Can you feel that moment that it just happens? Now, there's something that the head has to do in terms of its orientation that has an upward view to it. Otherwise, you'll stay on your knees, which was the previous iteration. Right? So there's something about the eyes and the head questing that turns something from standing on the knees into standing on the feet. And you don't have to get there, right? It's just the direction. And there's something about the arm, the swing of the arm and the swing of the legs and the pelvis that has this notion of up, not just around. So you're inhabiting a much bigger space. And you might be very happy to have that pivoting arm to help with this, or not. So some people, the arm is really useful. Other people, it pins them to the floor. So how could your arm be useful on the floor but not pinned to the floor? And are you aware of the front of the room and the back of the room, and the front of you and the back of you? And then how do you come back down again? Oh my goodness. So that means you have lie on your back, lie on your back, lie on your back. Let's try and think it through. So this is quite stimulating for your vision and your vestibular system, if not everything other system in you. So if you feel a little bit swimmy, that's quite normal because your head's probably not used to that degree of carriage through space. And you're just flushing out a bit of dust in the pipes, so to speak. So if you are feeling a little bit swimmy, really use the floor, use gravity, use your bones to orient you. I know who I am because I know where I am, kind of thing. And I'm here, I'm on the floor, I can feel my feet on the floor, I can feel my backside on the floor. The floor doesn't lie. This was really tricky when I was teaching a workshop about 6 months after the second Christchurch earthquake. And of course, it was so fundamentally destabilising for that incredibly resilient population, as it turns out. But because we lie on the floor and we have this assumption that the ground is trustworthy. And I talked to people as a public workshop, I was talking to particularly the older people, and they'd experienced where they couldn't trust the ground anymore. It was so fundamental, the fact that it happened twice. They were so shaken, literally shaken to their core. Like the language is really accurate. So why am I telling you that? Now you don't trust the floor. Well, you can here, right? You can. But they had to learn a degree of adaptability where they had to trust themselves in a very shifty kind of world. When I was teaching, in one place. I was teaching one of the universities, and I was stalking around like this, teaching, and they were on the floor. And every time I looked out the window, you saw this great big kind of nibbler thing, this big kind of crane thing. It was just delicately coming up like the bell hand and grabbing off a piece of building and pulling it down. It was just amazing. Just like the bell hand. It was extraordinary. And they'd just get on with life, with this kind of thing happening on. They were so resilient, extraordinary. Okay, so that's a story. Take you out of yourselves, come back into yourself, feel that you've found your stability again, and what a skill that is. To find your stability in your orientation is a skill. Slowly come back up to sitting. And take a good 5 minutes sitting there with your feet standing, leaning on your hands, to think through that movement and be really honest with yourself about where you lose it and where it's just momentum that carries you through, and where you're really unclear. You lose an arm, or you lose a leg, or you lose your pelvis or your belly button or your coccyx. And there might be little micro movements in you. That's perfectly fine. And think through the weight shift so that you can sense that weight shift when things shift across the floor from one side to the other, when something gets lighter, when it lifts up. Use the floor as a reference. Know that you're starting off facing the front of the room. And by and large, with this lesson, you end up standing facing the back of the room. Now, if you lose a lot of momentum, you might do it, instead of a 180, you'll do a 270. So think that through as well. Realising that thinking, this conscious thinking of a movement, is quite a conceit. We're kind of pretending that this is all very conscious. We're bringing it to a consciousness. Our consciousness is not that good at this kind of detail, right? Our subconscious is so much better at this detail than our consciousness. But we're playing this game of bringing it to our consciousness, illuminating it, if you like. So that when it sinks back into the unconscious, i.e. the habitual, it's somehow richer. Go ahead and work through any part of the sequence that you like. Actually, you can I would encourage you to work through some of the sequence that you don't like, because that might be more interesting. But you remember you said this, ATMs, it's about this appropriate balance of achievement versus challenge. So you can have that in mind. How much do you want to challenge yourself? And use the timing. Play around with the timing, as well as the orientation, as well as the specific moves. And then the reversing. So the reversing, you might need to do the whole movement up and then just do little bits back so that you can actually keep reproducing it. This is learning to learn, right? This is learning, how did I do that? I'm learning how I can do it better. Better and better. My failures can be more and more discreet, more and more informative. Are there places where I stiffen? Are there places where I hold my breath? Which parts feel super? Can I get my ego out of the way? This kind of evolutionary thing of finding your own 2 feet, how's that? And leave it and rest. Rest on your back. So just to give you the context of the whole room, the quality really shifted in that iteration, didn't it? Really, really. So there's something about practice, yes, but this kind of practice with awareness and knowledge that changes quality. And then Fran and I, you know, we're sitting here watching you, we think, what was it that we picked up that would lead us to say that the quality changed? So you experienced it as individuals. So we can contemplate that afterwards too. What are the metrics, if you like? What are you paying attention to? What is it? What are the things that change, that improve quality? And in your mind's eye, again, when you're lying now, so you're not actually in the position, could you recap on the whole movement? Could you do a video replay in your head? Now that tells you something about the way I imagine a video replay. Maybe you need to do like a kinesthetic replay, so you sense yourself, not just see yourself. How could you use other senses to recap on that really complicated but actually quite beautifully simple spiral? And maybe you set the task a little bit more simply. Could you track the movement of your pelvis throughout the entire sequence? And what do you immediately put as the landmarks of your pelvis? Is it those wing bits where you put your hands when you have your hands at your waist, or is it your pubic bone at the front, or is it your coccyx at the back, or what part of your pelvis are you tracking? And in your kinesthetic memories, you're replaying this. How true is it? Where do you lose it? So if you had that time-lapse camera and we could take a series of still pictures, it would track that movement. Again, that metaphor is very visual, gives you a little clue into that window of my process, a little window into my processing. I've got this great visual feedback device at work where we can actually take these kinds of images so people can replay visually what they've done. And then drop that, leave it, rest your mind, rest your imagination, rest your body. And now think through a congruent way to come up to sitting that then leads you into this spiral to standing. Think it through, try it. You're not satisfied, go back, do it again. So that you use the tilting of the knees to bring you up to standing. So somehow you come up to sitting with the soles of your feet standing. And you keep that movement going until you come up onto your feet. Take your time. If you need to recap, that's perfectly fine. Once you're satisfied, and what is satisfaction? Satisfaction is not perfection, right? If anybody's got the Be Perfect script, I'm sure nobody in here has, just me, maybe. You've got rid of yours? Yeah.
Smashed to pieces.
Smashed to pieces. You know, it's a script. You can put it, leave it on the floor. When you're satisfied enough with this approximation, just stand, then I can get a sense of where the room is at. Oh. Beautiful. And stay with this idea that you are still paying attention to yourself, and now you're starting to become aware also of other people around you. Now, you had to be aware of other people around you so you didn't clock into them with this spiral business. So it's an interesting transitional lesson, right? Going from that introspective lying on the floor business to this opportunity to be more what, again, I don't know what, you know what I mean, externally oriented, standing up, right? Which means it would be a great opportunity for you to start slowly walking around and notice the weight shift. And are there little elements of that spiral up that you tap into when you're walking? So think about the trajectory of your pelvis. Think about the shift of weight from one side to the other. Think about the length of one leg versus the other. Think about the movement of the chest through space and the head through space. What could your system take from that spiraling up that might be useful to walk? And Silvana's going backwards, which is a really interesting choice because it demands something different from your pelvis, and it might make it more obvious, the movement of your pelvis through space. So walking backwards is such an illuminating activity. We do it a lot after FI, you probably noticed, and after ATM. You could turn around yourself. Some people are doing that, really feeling how when you're negotiating in a real world environment, it's full of twists and turns, right? There's not a lot of straight lines walking in life. Could you keep walking and straighten somebody's mat up? You know, channel that inner OCD in you. So you could kind of walk and negotiate with gravity and reach down and straighten the mat, and it could come back up again and spin off, and it would all be fine. Right? So that it's not, walking is not just going forwards and backwards, but it's actually going up and down. Dodging trees, ducking under things. Yeah, look out for that low-flying seagull. Whew, who saw that coming? Just how adaptable could it be? How elegant could it be? Lovely. Okay. You can spiral your way to the toilet or the tea and coffee or wherever you like. And we'll have we'll come back about 10 past 11. Spiraling is very good for the digestion.